What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Today is Friday, November 15th. I cannot believe we are this close to Thanksgiving. I cannot believe that we are even that much closer to Christmas as we inch closer to the holidays here. We are now in week 11 of the National Football League season, and last night, the week kicked off, Thursday Night Football. The Pittsburgh Steelers took on the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. As the Cleveland Browns coming off that win over the Buffalo Bills, moved to 3-6. The Steelers looking to stay within the playoff race. And the game, as always, on Thursday Night Football, they're boring. There are not many games in the history of Thursday Night Football that I can honestly say, one, that I remember as being entertaining, two, that I remember at all. These games are really boring. These games are not fun to watch, but when there's nothing else to watch on TV on a Thursday night and you have a football game on, I guess that is what we are obligated to watch because we love football, I love football, you love football. That's why you tune into these sports podcasts. And that's why you tune into my sports podcast because you know what it's going to bring. You know what it's going to entail. It's going to entail sports talk from yours truly. And last night, for as boring a game as that was, a 21-7 final score with the Cleveland Browns now 4-6 as they're trying to inch their way closer to a AFC wildcard spot. One of the most disgusting things that I have ever seen as a sports fan, as a football fan, albeit a very short football career, I guess you could say, Pop Warner modified football that I had. One of the most disgusting things that I've ever seen in the game of football took place last night, and it sent shockwaves throughout the Twitter sphere, Facebook. It was everywhere. Instagram. Myles Garrett taking the helmet off of Mason Rudolph and hitting him on the top of the head with it was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen on a football field. There have been plenty of moments where players have done things that are quote-unquote dirty. Ndamukong Suh, Rodney Harrison, John Randall, to go back a few years. Obviously, in the 1970s, you watch NFL films football from the 1970s, you see guys like Deacon Jones, you see guys like Jack Tatum, you see guys in the 80s like Ronnie Lott just leveling players, just putting players in midair, flipping them over while the player does a somersault in midair. I mean, this day and age of football is completely different from the day and age of my dad's generation, my grandfather's generation. This day and age of football is completely different. But even in comparison to those rough and tough 1970s, 1960s, 1980s decades of football, even the 1990s, I have never seen anything like this. I have never seen a player take the helmet off of an opponent and use it as a weapon. Just purely disgusting. And what was even more disgusting about it, the fact that nobody is talking about this, or at least maybe they're not talking about it as much as they should be, is the fact that the Cleveland Browns jumped for joy on the sideline while the fight between Mason Rudolph, the offensive lineman with the last name that I cannot pronounce, that I will not try to butcher, and Myles Garrett ensued. While that brawl ensued, the Cleveland Browns sideline acted like they were in the crowd of a Jerry Springer episode. They acted like complete idiots. And not only that, when that instance takes place, and it is heated as it was, Mike Tomlin and Freddie Kitchens, the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously, and the coach of the Cleveland Browns, they come together at the middle of the field, they talk it over and find out what the heck is going on and try to calm down the tempers of their respective teams. I think a telltale sign of a good coach is how they handle adversity moments after it happens. Mike Tomlin, he's asked and baited all these questions. As reporters try to bait him into answering these questions, Mike Tomlin says, "I will not answer any questions about this instance." Freddie Kitchens says, I am not even going to. Freddie Kitchens takes a completely opposite perspective and says, well, helmet-to-helmet collisions happen. Yeah, helmet-to-helmet collisions happen in football, but a player taking off his helmet and hitting his opponent in the head with it, that is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it, and Myles Garrett, at the very least, should be suspended for the entirety of this season. For a team that is trying to make the playoffs, for a team that is trying to make something happen, the fact that Myles Garrett would take his helmet and try to strike his opponent with it is just completely disgusting. The most disgusting thing I've ever seen on a football field. And he should be suspended, I think, for not only the remainder of this season, but at least half of next season as well. If I were to give what I think should be his punishment for Myles Garrett for this instance, I would say that he should be suspended the rest of this season, a 16-game suspension at the very least. A 16-game suspension for Myles Garrett. What an idiot. What a moron for Myles Garrett to do this to his team in the midst of a win. That's what you got to remember about this. The Cleveland Browns won last night. The Cleveland Browns inched closer to trying to achieve their goal in basically fixing this mess of a season and ultimately trying to make it to the playoffs. And they didn't do that. They didn't do that. They took one step forward and 5 steps backwards thanks to Myles Garrett. This guy let his teammates down. This guy let himself down. And most importantly, he put a huge stain on the NFL. And my next segue point here, I laid down what I think should happen to Myles Garrett. I think he should be suspended for at least 16 games. This was assault, and anyone that disagrees with that, yeah, it's on a football field. Yeah, things can happen. But he used his helmet as a weapon to strike the head of his opponent. I've said it 50 times, I've never seen anything like that. I never have even thought of that coming to fruition. I've never seen a player try to do that. Usually when a helmet comes off, it's somewhat of an unwritten rule in the game of football that you stop. You stop once the helmets are off and you call it a day. That's like the unwritten rule. I've never seen a player take a player's helmet off and use it as a weapon. Yes, that is assault. Had the hardest part of that helmet hit the softest part of Mason Rudolph's head, we could be talking about something very, 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 very bad. As if this wasn't bad enough, this is bad, but this could have been so much worse. We could be talking about Mason Rudolph. Who knows? Who knows? And yes, it's a division rivalry. Yes, it's the Steelers. Yes, it's the Browns. But that was terrible. There's no place for that in this day and age of the National Football League. Maybe in the 1970s, maybe in the 1980s, maybe in the 1990s, but still you have players coming out of the woodwork from those eras saying they have never even seen anything like that. That they've never seen anything like that. And I think the discussion has to be bigger than this, than what happens to Myles Garrett. I think the discussion should be, what the hell is the NFL going to do to punish Myles Garrett? If they want to punish players, if they care about player safety as much as they say they do, as much as they let out that they do, they should really slam the gavel down and really make an example out of Myles Garrett so that other players don't do things that are this stupid. This was stupid. This was beyond dumb. This was disgusting. Malicious intent, 100%. No doubt about it. And what was even worse is they show, Mike Tomlin. They show Freddie Kitchens say a bunch of stupid stuff. Then they show Myles Garrett. And Myles Garrett just sat in his locker with this stone cold face as if there was zero empathy, zero sympathy for the situation. And worse than that, he didn't even apologize to Mason Rudolph. I mean, this will stay with Myles Garrett for the remainder of his career. There is no doubt about it. He will be labeled a dirty player from that moment on, as he should be. If the NFL gives a rat's about player safety, they will do far more about this than what they have in instances like this in years past. They need to set an example and let it be known that this cannot happen. If they are going to worry about player safety in terms of how they market the league and how they've changed the rules, how they've manipulated the rules of football, they need to throw the gavel down on Myles Garrett and punish him. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Follow me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take for all tweets. Ryan Thomas. Follow me on there. Also, you can subscribe to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and also subscribe to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel. Sunday night, I'll be live in Cheektowaga for the Thomas Takeover postgame show to recap the Buffalo Bills versus Miami Dolphins. Hopefully, we get a big win in Miami, and we push forward, moving on to 7-3 against Denver next week. Hopefully, Buffalo can get this W and put that Browns loss in the rearview mirror.